After 3 games, over 80 hours of combined gameplay, and months searching for a special edition, I can officially say that Fire Emblem Fates was as enjoyable as it was lengthy. And it seems that all of the hard work's paid off for Intelligent Systems, as the games haven't only received critical praise from review sites around the globe, but also combined to outsell the last game in the series, Fire Emblem Awakening, by an astronomical 5-to-1 ratio in their first week of sales. Yes, it seems that the beloved franchise, once on the brink of ruin, has turned on Phoenix mode and risen from the ashes, and at this point there's no denying that we're living in a golden age of Fire Emblem games. But are all of the accolades and Grima-sized piles of money helping the series blossom into the next chapter of its lifespan? Or has its success actually helped to sand down all of the hardcore edges that made this a series to remember in the first place? And most of all, now that they have a bona fide juggernaut on their hands, will Nintendo try to push these games to every market imaginable, like the new Mario or Pokemon? Well, I'm sure some of you are thinking that there's no way this is possible, and that even asking these questions is a waste of time. But what if I told you that whether you've noticed it or not, there are some pretty scary patterns that help support these outlandish questions? So whether you side with Hoshido or Nor, I urge you to keep watching, because by the end of this video, you'll see that Fire Emblem Fates might just be the game that seals the fate of this iconic franchise for good. Now, I know what you may be thinking based on that title card, but no, I'm not one of those advocates who thinks that Fate was absolutely gutted by its large amount of censorship. I know some people, particularly the diehard and older fans of the series, will absolutely rip into me for giving Fates a pass, but before you do, hear me out. Personally, I feel like the localization team didn't ruin the game, but they did go overboard with the forms of censorship they took with this game. Particularly, I feel like any of the dialogue changes beyond the controversial one with Soleil should not have been altered. That goes for personality changes like Effie, all the way to the cringe-inducing "That's Dragon for I Love You" dialogue alterations. My biggest problem with the localized edits, however, is the fact that because these games have now sold well over 300,000 copies in only a month, this proves that there are no real repercussions to how much Nintendo chooses to censor. For example, without trying to spoil anything, in one of the later chapters in Conquest, a certain character is implied to have committed suicide. And by imply, I basically mean everyone admits that this person selfishly offed themselves because they felt betrayed. I don't know if this was toned up or down from the Japanese version, and frankly, it's not important here, but the point is that if Nintendo can censor pages of dialogue and several features in Fates, and still break North American sales records for the entire series, then what's stopping them from deeming certain chapters, like that Conquest one, inappropriate in future games, and deciding to either alter the dialogue to make it seem like a character's just sleeping, thereby ruining the emotional impact, or simply just cut the chapter entirely? And I'm not suggesting that Nintendo's going to take the Japanese version of whatever sequel Intelligent Systems is working on and mangle it beyond recognition, but the real issue is that with its tremendous exposure in Western markets now, it's absolutely plausible that the development team may have to start limiting the more mature elements of the series in order to become even more inclusive to its more conservative North American audience. A perfect example of this is the life cycle of the Pokemon Empire, both in terms of the core series of games and the popular anime. At this point, it's no secret that Pokemon's creator, Satoshi Tajiri, originally envisioned the world of Pokemon as a much more mature and realistic place, despite how the overall concept was a child's dream come true. These ideas are reflected in the war addressed by Lieutenant Surge in the first generation of games, as well as the Pokemon Cemetery in Lavender Town, the horrendous circumstances of Mewtwo's birth via experimentation, and the fact that the Kanto region is based on an actual region of real-world Japan. But after Pokemania exploded around the world, all future installments became much friendlier in tone and very rarely utilized any concepts that may be considered okay in Japan, but harmful to the more sheltered youth of Western cultures. These games that were once programmed with young Japanese teenagers in mind are now most definitely created with a focus on appealing to small children worldwide. In fact, just look at how much the series shifted tonally after the success it experienced in North America. The allusions to concepts like war, crime, and death have been heavily cut down after Tajiri stepped away from the series for personal reasons, and a lot of the franchise's leap into more fantastical storytelling is absolutely in part to Pokemon's global popularity with children. And that's not a bad thing for Pokemon, as the games were always kid-friendly and only implied those more mature themes. My point is that the more success and acclaim the Pokemon series experienced in North America and worldwide, the more the franchise was toned down with each installment. And if you're sitting there saying, "Stan, Pokemon's always been rated E while Fire Emblem's a hard T, and no success or Western audience will ever change that fact," then hold on to your Thoron, because this next part is where things start to get scary. When it comes to Fire Emblem, I think many would agree that you can almost separate the series into two distinctive categories. These would be Before Awakening, or BA for short, and After Awakening, or AA if you feel so inclined. It's no secret that when Intelligent Systems created Awakening, it was made with the near certain idea that it would be the final installment in the long-running series. Sales were down globally, even after some stellar console games, and the team found themselves in a situation not unlike Sakaguchi and Final Fantasy. And like that industry shaker, Fire Emblem Awakening soared higher than ever thought possible, and finally grabbed a large chunk of Western audiences, but in doing so also sort of set the tone for what Fire Emblem was in the minds of many new players to the series. But this overwhelming success also created some problems, because many fans of the classic Fire Emblem style sort of feel like newer games like Fates are great RPGs, but not even close to being the classic experience they love so much. It's almost Fire Emblem, but only in the same way that Mega Man X is almost a core Mega Man game, and you're always going to have some fans who prefer one series over the other. But despite these differing opinions, the introduction of a casual mode was bearable because in some ways it was this experience that opened the doors and helped save the franchise. But then when many were expecting a return to the more hardcore ways of Fire Emblem's past, we got Phoenix mode instead. And I think it's at this point that the Before Awakening fans snapped and began wondering how this mode wasn't for children. Yes, the game has a strict teen rating and deals with plenty of mature subject matter, but if you've played through Awakening or Fates, then you know that casual is pretty forgiving whether you're an adult veteran or a teenager new to the series. It's just sort of mind-boggling that a franchise literally once applauded for its revolutionary concept of permadeath has now created a mode so easy that even Donald couldn't mess it up, and he's Donald. I'm aware that players looking for a challenge can still pick Maniac and enjoy the game sort of the way they remember, and I know it may seem like a jump or a nitpick, but to me the introduction of Phoenix mode coupled with all of this censorship is extremely troubling because, again, Fire Emblem was never intended to appeal to kids, and yet, for the life of me, I can't think of who else Phoenix mode could have been created for. And seriously, as dumb as it sounds that a game rated T would be marketed towards kids, what other explanation can there be? I mean, I sort of feel like the whole rating system is sort of meaningless anyways, because let's be honest, when it comes to video games at least, when we're kids, we're rarely buying our own games. Many tykes like myself end up playing loads of GTA or Resident Evil or Dark Souls way younger than we probably should, but you know what? Even though Rockstar or Capcom probably assume that their games attract younger crowds the more popular they get, that doesn't mean they just replace bullets with paintballs or make a newcomers mode, thereby actually conflicting with the very gameplay mechanics and mature themes that made them stand out in the first place. And no, I'm not trying to put Fire Emblem in the same realm as those M-rated series, but I swear that with each new game, the target audience gets younger and younger, and I wouldn't be surprised if the next entry is rated E10 in hopes of getting even more kids to play, therefore making sure that those sequels outsell even Fate's record-breaking numbers. I mean, hell, that's exactly what the Smash Bros. Series did with its latest installments, and yet it's not like we didn't play Melee or Brawl despite them both being rated T. But let's face it, with these encouraging sales figures and global promotion in games like Smash, Fire Emblem is slowly encroaching into the spotlight typically reserved for bigger franchises like Metroid and, yes, in some ways even Pokemon, and the more popular these characters and games become, the more pressure the company will have to keep making the next installment do better than the last. Which is sort of a double-edged sword because although it means we get more great games, this will also mean more marketable games. Which, if Phoenix mode is anything to go by, means going cleaner, going simpler, and going more inclusive until the games are as accessible as possible. But hey, at least everyone may be able to get their hands on the next game special edition, right? Now, this is the one that's going to decide if any of the stuff I've been saying is worth anything. And admittedly, I could be way off, and this theory could prove to be dumber than a support conversation between Saizo and Baruka. But consider this for a moment. Why is there breeding in Fates? No, seriously, why does it exist in these three games? I'm not saying that the concept is a bad one. In fact, for me, it was probably the most genius and refreshing aspects of Awakening's gameplay. But in that game, it made sense. It made sense because time travel was a key part of the plot, and one of the main characters was in fact a member of a dystopian future who travels back in order to prevent it. It was tasty stuff, and as an enthusiast of all things time travel, I ate it up without question. But in Fates, I can't help but question everything. So for those of you who don't know, basically the way breeding works in this game is you make two characters of the opposite sex achieve S rank, and they then have a baby. The problem is that without time travel as a crutch, the game lazily explains that due to there being a war and all, you essentially throw your unchaperoned children into a pocket dimension called the Deep Realms that runs on accelerated time. Yes, a pocket dimension, like Narnia or the digital world from Digimon, where time runs faster. This uninspired idea is the explanation as to how you can recruit your newly birthed children into the party and not have them soiling their diapers on the battlefield. But as many reputable gaming journalists have pointed out in their otherwise fair reviews, this concept makes absolutely no sense. It's not built up or remotely justified like time travel. It's not even explained in a legitimate or believable way. It just sort of feels like an afterthought. But so why would Intelligent Systems incorporate one of Awakening's defining mechanics into a game that has zero places for it? Well, because that game sold millions of copies, and when making a sequel, you can't change the formula too much or else it won't sell nearly as well. And yes, like Phoenix Mode, no one's ever come out and actually given us a plausible answer as to why this thing exists, but we have to assume it's because of money or greed or whatever. The point is that regardless of why, having a poorly explained breeding feature shows that the creators are okay with shoehorning a lazy mechanic into a game that actually detracts from an otherwise decent storyline just because it's popular. And the reason I've spent so much time bringing this up is that it absolutely shows that going forward, Nintendo and Intelligent Systems are okay with adding popular features or shoehorning in well-known characters into the game, even if the plotline suffers for it. This is bad news because this essentially confirms that they're willing to cut chapters in future games even if it makes no sense within continuity. They're willing to remove any challenge if it means more people get their hands on the title. And they're willing to Pokemon this franchise up by creating 2 future installments per game because Birthright and Conquest combined for sales larger than the company ever could have predicted. That means that this one really cool and defining thing Fates has going for it is legitimately in danger of becoming just another overused and nonsensical part of the series, all because of money. And if it proves true, this means that Fates will retroactively become less and less memorable as the franchise continues to grow. The thing is, I really want this series to succeed. Myself and many others want it to one day be as lauded and as impactful as a series like Pokemon to Nintendo's future. I honestly believe that after 26 years, it deserves all the success it's achieving and more. But myself and a lot of other people really don't want it to lose its identity in the process. Change is a good thing, and finding an addictive formula is even better than that. But Fire Emblem has always stood apart because it challenges. Because it kept pushing the boundaries of what a great RPG can be, and because it was an experience you couldn't get from any other series or franchise before it, and it's discouraging that this brilliant team of designers may have chosen the wrong path after all. And yes, this video may be a poor man's game theory, but until Fire Emblem actually does Pokemon numbers, you all knew MatPat wasn't going to touch it. Hey guys, Stan here. I just want to say thank you for being patient. I know it's been like 3 weeks since a video. This one just took a little longer than anticipated. I also just want to clear the air here. I don't hate Fates. I actually love it. I'm really addicted to it. I just noticed some things in it that were direct carryovers from Awakening, and I'm sort of scared of sequelitis. And in fact, Awakening is one of my top 5 RPGs of all time. So yeah. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next week.